Good evening, Garland Nixon, Scott Ritter, and Andrei Martyanov. We got plenty to talk about. There's maybe offensives and dams blowing up, all kind of stuff. Let's talk. Well, gentlemen, great to talk to you again, and I'm sure we have a willing and loyal audience. There's a lot of stuff going on. I've got on my favorite hat, so it's time to talk. Let's start here. Andre, I did a video the other day about this offensive, whatever the hell, and I said, I think the Russians basically blew the hell out of everything they were going to use for the offensive, and I think they're going to do some pinpricks and call it an offensive. What is going on here in this so-called offensive? Is it an offensive? Is it the prelude to an offensive? Is this the best they can do? Andre, your thoughts?
The bunch of the nobodies in New York Times, they learned the new phrase. It's called a recon in force. So they're using it starting this morning. That's a recon in force. Well, what can I tell you? And I spoke today early morning with my friends, including people who are actually on the front line. We're talking about level of the brigade commanders and higher. And it's actually on YouTube now. So basically, as what Shoigu stated, fact is he under again, Russian Minister of Defense usually is very conservative in accounts. It wasn't a recon in force. Obviously, it was the attempt to provide the pressure along whatever they could do along the whole front line. In 48 hours, they lost about 4,000 TIAs alone. You can look up the what's available now and even videos in Kiev, the railway stations. They just have those trains packed with the bodies, primarily wounded, and they have like rows of their, emergency medical cars, when you look at this, apart from the fact that there was a number of tanks, and of course the hysteria about the 8 Leopards, which 2 of them we already have confirmed the videos, So it was the attempt, but as we already know, they blew up the Kakhovka dam as both, kind of diversionary thing to create more sympathy and probably also blame it on Russians and switch focus to what everybody knew from the get-go of this, vaunted offensive, which was supposed to start, like last year, then this year, then so that it will be a slaughter, and slaughter it turned out to be. And today, yesterday actually, when Shoigu, Minister of Defense, started to say numbers, is kind of like, yeah, it was an attempt, and they got what was expected, basically.
Scott, yeah, if those numbers, I've heard anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 in a day and a half to 2 days. If they were going to do more, it seems to me they would have to stop. But your thoughts, was this the offensive? Was this all they have? Is this a prelude to more? Your thoughts, Scott Ritter?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think we have to understand that the Ukrainian army is still quite large. And still quite lethal. And so we shouldn't be too dismissive of this. But the Russians have, been adapting over time. It's not as though the Russians are just sitting there doing nothing. They've adapted their tactics. They've adapted their technology. And I think the big thing we have to look at here is the degradation of Ukrainian air defense, which then gives Russian air power as close to free reign as possible. And the development by Russia of the glide bomb, basically taking a Fab 500, a 500 kilogram bomb, putting wings on it and precision guidance, which allows the bomb to be released well outside of any Ukrainian air defense envelope and hit any target it wants to. The Russians have been disrupting Ukrainian preparations for this counteroffensive for some time now. The intelligence capabilities of Russia have been improving. Their targeting has been improving, and we have to keep in mind that things just don't happen out of the blue. To assemble a brigade is a considerable effort. The amount of equipment, the manpower, the ammunition, the fuel, and all of the logistics necessary, have to be brought together and accumulated in some fashion. And the Russians have been destroying ammunition dumps. They've been destroying troop concentrations. They've been destroying warehouses where equipment has been, positioned. And so, this counteroffensive, basically, it's almost impossible for it to get traction. To launch a meaningful attack against Russia, for instance, the Ukrainians launched, according to these stories, 2 brigades, 2 of their 12 new brigades. I think it was the 24th and the 31st. These are NATO-equipped, NATO-trained. These are the guys that we've been waiting for. These are the ones. So that's why when people say, well, we don't know. No, I'm telling you right now, they put 2 of the top brigades into combat. And the best these brigades do is advance 700 meters and gain access to a couple villages. And then they all died. That's what happened. Where are the rest of the brigades? There's 12 of them in total. You cannot win a fight unless you sustain the momentum. I always enjoy hearing people like Mark Hertling, and he, the former American Lieutenant General who was on CNN a lot. And he was up there smiling like a Cheshire cat when this battle first started. And what I want to tell you about Wolf or whoever the CNN person was talking to is, the term here is momentum. And the Ukrainians have momentum. They don't have anything, General. Their forces have never been able to even get traction. They have been destroyed piecemeal. They brought in 2 brigades. They committed 6 battalions. And these battalions got slaughtered as they moved forward, made a small indentation in the initial line of defense. And then the Russians hit them with everything they had that they've been waiting for. And that was it. If this was momentum, there would have been 2 more brigades immediately following up. And they would have gone another 700 meters. And then the next momentum would have been 2 more brigades immediately following up. And you keep pushing until you get the breakthrough. And then a breakthrough force comes through. But the moment you start and stop and you lose literally 1/6 of your assault force that has been building up for 8 months, this is doomed to fail. And this is the sad reality of it. The Russians admitted 71 dead and 240 wounded. That's big casualties, guys. I mean, go back to Vietnam or anything. That's significant casualties. It's not as though nothing's happening, but it's a drop in the bucket. The Russians haven't lost anything compared to the Ukrainians. The Russians can do this all day long, and they will. And I think their goal is just to let the Ukrainians beat their heads against a brick wall, dissipate this force, whatever force they're able to get, and then we'll see what the Russians do in terms of offensive action. But this is the counteroffensive. Let there be no doubt about it. People can play games. Ukrainians can put cute videos up there. We're not going to talk about it. But this is it. You don't take 2 of the elite brigades and sacrifice them in a reconnaissance force. A reconnaissance force, first of all, isn't done with 2 brigades.
Yeah.
It's done with a reinforced battalion.
Yeah.
You go in there and you do your thing. You don't. The other key aspect of reconnaissance force is you don't decisively engage. You push until they push back. You engage. You get some commitment, and then you pull back. It's not meant to be a suicide mission. This was a suicide mission for 2 of Ukraine's best brigades.
Plus, do not forget. Pardon. Sorry.
Go ahead, Andrei.
No, we have to remember also, out of those 12 brigades, 10 of those brigades, and I don't know what's the name of this general on CNN, but I would suggest Mr. Petraeus and Keane from Institute of the Study of War learn such word as called echelon. That's what Scott was talking about, that you throw some people, they breach the line, then you have to try to pour, as many as you can. The point is, out of those 12 brigades, 2 of them essentially have been wiped out of the order of battle. 10 of them are located in such a way that they are 1 day it depends how you measure day, 12 or 24 hours march distance from the battlefield, from the line of the contact. So that tells you something. That means what? They know, they go on, they get into, and again, you have to, if you look at the brigade order, let alone the division and how they fight, you at some point of time have to get into the column, okay? And then when you get into the column, before you get into the engagement, you have to build into several columns, those company columns, and things like that. And that's pretty much when you look at the situation with the ISR. And as I already stated, even battalion level command post today sees about 30 kilometers in depth.
Yeah, we lost Scott here, and hopefully he'll be back in a second. He dropped out. I don't know if his computer dropped out or what, but let's hope he gets back out. Well, let me ask you this. It seems to me that if you're commanding and you send in 2 columns and they get shredded, send in 2 brigades, we got 12 grades. You send in 2 brigades and they get crushed. It seems to me if you're in charge, you got to call it off. That someone had to say, we can't, don't send any more, because you now know. And if you remember the discussion beforehand, there were people in Ukraine saying this could be a massacre. This could be, really, really bad. Well, it turned out to be a massacre. Does it seem to you like maybe they turned it off? Maybe they said, hey, we can't go any further with this. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll give you just that, so to speak, heads up on this issue. Very many people in Russia, including actually from high ups, including the top brass and political elite, many. I'm not sure that I can say that everybody, but certainly many, including the political elite and in many decision-making circles, as today's speech by Sergei Lavrov actually proved. They openly state that actually it's Pentagon who plans that, So, and the point is that there was already now what is very healthy process. I like that it started because I started it many years ago, actually writing about, and people begin to say, hey, look up their field manuals, U.S. Army field manuals. Look up, how it connects, in this respect. You cannot apply those, cliches. You cannot apply those patterns to what is going on there because it's a completely different war. And again, I point out, it's not still not a war. It's special military operations. Once the war is declared, God forbids, we're gonna see the whole different picture. Well, to start with, actually, the center of the Kiev could be flattened and turned into the parking lot, So, and there will be nobody to talk to. So, and that's what many people don't understand. There is still restraint, primarily against, not harming civilians, but in terms of another, so to speak, a baloney, which many people think like that. Oh, Russians are suffering because they're brotherly people. There is no. Majority of Russians don't think that like this anymore. They certainly have their pity, and many refugees from Ukraine are in Russia together with those networks of the saboteurs, and so FSB has to kind of be on its toes. But truth is that I don't care if he's Russian, Ukrainian, or whoever. If he's a Nazi, just kill him. So there you go.
Scott, let's talk about get thoughts from each of you gentlemen about the dam today. There was articles in the Washington Post months ago. There was a number of articles about Ukrainian military leaders. They fired HIMARS at the dam. They discussed how they could take out the dam. They plotted on how they could take out the dam, and now the dam got took out, and they said the Russians did it. Your thoughts on the dam? To me, and here's my thoughts. These are people who are all about narrative and show. This thing flopped. They had to do something. They're like, we'll blow up the dam. There'll be a lot of water, and then we can say the Russians did it, and we won't talk about. We'll stop talking about this, and we'll talk about the dam, because I don't see that it gives them a tremendous military advantage. In the situation that they're in now, a military advantage that they would be able to take advantage of, if you know what I'm saying. Scott.
Well, I mean, let's just start with what you just said about military advantage. I think some people have said that when you empty the reservoir, it makes it easier for a riverine crossing. That's okay if you're an army that is capable of assembling that kind of force, meaning that you're going to build a bridge. You're going to establish a bridge across a river obstacle. But you need air defense. You need the ability to project power across the bridge to defend the bridgehead. And it takes time. This doesn't happen instantaneously. Understand that Russia will destroy whatever effort is being done even before it gets assembled, because they have their air force with their standoff bombing capability. And NATO knows this, and Ukraine knows this. So the notion that Ukraine is being clever here by draining the reservoir for some genius offensive operation is absurd in the extreme. Ukraine doesn't have the ability to accumulate that kind of force. This wasn't done for military advantage by Ukraine. This was done for political purposes. This was an act of terrorism, eco-terrorism, that was done to generate enthusiasm, if you want to use that word, amongst the West for hating Russia again. It was waning. The counteroffensive has failed. While there still may be some fighting ahead, and I expect there will be, I think it was clear to everybody that this has no chance. And people were talking about it beforehand. There's an important NATO meeting coming up in Vilnius. And if Ukraine doesn't find a way to generate Western support, it's all over. It's all she wrote. It's done, because there's nothing left in NATO to give. There's nothing left for NATO to give. They can talk about F-16 fighters. That just isn't even realistic. It's not going to happen. If it does happen, it'll be a huge embarrassment to everybody involved. So this was an act of eco-terrorism carried about the Ukrainians. And, there's a couple reasons why they would do this. First of all, understand what they just did. They destroyed Kherson, one of the major cities of Ukraine, the capital of the Kherson Oblast or district. Why? Because they know, and I think Ukraine has just admitted that they're going to lose everything. That at least the initial Russian objective of reclaiming all of the territory that belongs to Russia, that is the totality of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Lugansk, that this is inevitable, that this will happen. So what they're doing is making it as expensive as possible for Russia down the road, because Vladimir Putin has said his number one goal and objective is the economic and social reconstruction, rehabilitation of these territories. They just made the rehabilitation of Kherson a multi-billion-dollar proposition. So this is their way of jamming it to the Russians. They've also created a ecological disaster in the Black Sea that Russia is going to have to deal with. This was terrorism, pure and simple. I think everybody needs to understand what happened here. This was the Ukrainians in an act of spite committing economic and political terrorism against the Russian nation, against not just the people that are there, but again, the costs that are going to accrue because of this are tremendous. And it's going to be Russia that has to pay for this, because that's what Russia does. It takes care of its own territories. But I think that's why the Ukrainians did it. It's a recognition of the collapse of their counteroffensive, the fact that this counteroffensive isn't going to succeed. It's an effort to generate some sort of anti-Russian enthusiasm amongst the West in the lead up to the Vilnius NATO summit. And it's just a way of increasing the price Russia's going to pay for this war. But it has zero military benefit that accrues from this.
Andrei.
We have to remember also when Surovikin took control in the end of the year, last year, of the special military operation, before Gerasimov obviously came on board completely and he was the guy who said, yeah, we're not defending Kherson, it's in the lowers. And what people do not understand that actually Rosatom today, representative of Russian Rosatom, who they say there is no danger, to the cooling system of the Zaporozhye nuclear power station, and the Russian positions on the left bank, they are on the elevations, so it doesn't affect the Russian position whatsoever. And again, the point is, when, most likely when, since today I am convinced that it's now just a matter of when, it's not if. When Russia begins their roll towards the Nikolaev and Odessa, after dealing with Kharkov, I would say, but again, these are my speculations, don't quote me on that. It will be the issue of going downwards, so along the Dnieper River, north, southwards, as it was done again in 1944 by Red Army troops when they were liberating exactly, and they were progressing along what is called Liman, and along Dnieper River. Why force it? Why go over it, especially now, since, even if there is 5 centimeters of water left after that, you're not going to be able to move the equipment anyway. And do not forget who actually blew up Antonovsky Bridge in the end. It wasn't Ukraine, actually. These were Russians who were, withdrew to the left bank. There was an order, and Antonovsky Bridge, which connects Kherson to the left bank, was blown up because there was no necessity to have it. While if you look attentively at the modus operandi in terms of the transportation infrastructure, you will see yourself that Russians are very cautious with other bridges. So they don't blow them; they really preserve them. So
now let's talk about this. One of the things we've been hearing is, okay, well, after that, if it works, if it doesn't work, whatever, that the neocons will want to escalate. Okay, I'm not going to say they don't want to escalate. The question becomes, if you want to escalate, what are your options? And let's talk about, I have my thought. When it comes to military, I don't see any options in that. I mean, and I put it like this. The Russians created a trash compactor in Ukraine, and NATO just kept filling it with their equipment. So to me, the NATO countries are losing in the enthusiasm. People are more and more. We're hearing people say, "Hey, why are we doing this? We need to stop." We're seeing Africa, we're seeing South America, we're seeing Asia, we're seeing Denmark saying, "Hey, let's have a peace summit." It's going to, and of course they don't have the troops. What are their options? They don't seem to have a lot of military options if they want to escalate. What do you think happens next after the what appears to be a flop of an offensive? Let's just say they try. Well, we already know if they send the rest of the brigades, it ain't going to work out well for them. Escalation. What are their options, Scott Ritter?
Well, what are NATO's options?
Yeah,
they don't have any options. I mean, let's just be very straight up here. General Cavoli said this last January, that the scope and scale of violence taking place in Ukraine today was beyond the imagination of NATO. That NATO hasn't prepared for this, they're not trained for this, equipped for this, they don't have the logistics for this, especially when it comes to artillery and firepower. I had to laugh when I watched General Miley visit the Grafenwohr training area, and they were training Ukrainian battalions in the combined arms operations. I'm a specialist in combined arms operations. I was in the Marine Corps when maneuver warfare became our Bible. And I spent 2.5 years in 29 Palms, California, basically doing live fire combined arms maneuver operations on large scale. I know what it takes to train up units to be combat proficient. And what they were doing in Grafenwohr was not training them up to be combat proficient. It was training them up to fake it. But let me put it this way. The Ukrainian forces that came off of Grafenwohr were better than anything NATO had, except maybe in the United States, except maybe a couple battalions of the British Army, maybe some battalions in the French Army. The rest of NATO, they can't do combined arms operations, incapable of it, don't know how to do it, aren't trained for it, aren't equipped for it, because it's expensive, and NATO just has been cutting corners all this time. NATO doesn't have a military worthy of the name. First of all the power of NATO is dispersed throughout Europe. Need to understand that. So for NATO to accumulate military power, they're going to have to take forces out of the barracks. That's an impossibility for about 80% of NATO's military. They can't leave their barracks because they don't have the equipment to do it. They don't have the logistics to do it. They have nothing. Then they have to move them, transport them from all over Europe to where they're going. The roads can't handle it. The tunnels can't handle it. The bridges can't handle it. So already we're running into trouble here. But even if they got the forces assembled, they don't know how to do anything larger than a brigade-size exercise. That's it. They don't know how to do a passage of lines, a brigade-size passage lines, or God forbid they had to do a division-size passage line. Now, Andrei knows what I'm talking about here. This is something that happens in combat where, for instance, a division, we were talking about the echeloning of forces. A brigade launches an attack. The next brigade will have to come through and do a passage of lines to continue the attack. This is a very complicated procedure that requires extensive coordination and communication. You need staffs that know how to do this, or else it turns into a classic cluster, you know what, which then creates this giant target of vehicles caught in traffic jams and troops, and then they all die when the bombs hit. You have to practice this over and over again. We practice it all the time in 29 Palms, California, and I have to tell you, we still goofed it up. We'd still get the traffic jams, even though we're doing everything right. And this is using Marines, who I consider to be the finest combat troops that ever walked the face of the earth, who are well-trained, experienced, and they still screwed it up. Now you're going to take the Ukrainians that don't have any training. They can't do it. But NATO hasn't trained for this at all. Zero training. General Hodges, who is the former commander of U.S. forces in Europe, sort of a loudmouth, a blabbermouth, cocky little you-know-what, he's finally admitted NATO can't do anything. They've got nothing. That's the first honest thing he said. NATO has no options, zero options. And they're going to run into this reality when they gather in Vilnius, because Stoltenberg has said, I want to increase the size of the rapid deployment force from 40,000 to 300,000. First of all, he doesn't have 40,000 rapidly deployable troops. It's a joke. They have 40,000 troops that have been earmarked for rapid deployment, but I dare you to try and rapidly deploy them. You can't, for the same reasons I've already said. Logistically, they can't do it. And even if they did do it, these 40,000 troops don't know how to fight. They can't fight a modern war. Now he wants to take it to 300,000. Whose troops? He hasn't coordinated this with anybody. They don't exist. And to try and make them exist would bankrupt all of Europe with their economies that are sliding into recession. Europe has no options. That's why the coming NATO summit is of a critical importance. This is why Ukraine blew up the dam, because NATO is going to come face to face with the fact that all they have are words. They don't have any substance. And they're going to have to start realizing that their worst nightmare is about to happen. I've said for some time now, I believe Russia will militarily win this conflict by the end of summer, early fall. They're on a timeline to do that. What will NATO do at that point in time? Because at that point in time, NATO will have suffered a strategic defeat. And so politically, they have to be prepared to try and find an off-ramp from this conflict. And the off-ramp will not be military in nature. People keep talking about Poland. Understand that the Polish military isn't any good. It's no good. They can't do offensive operations on any scale. The Russians are specialists in this kind of war. They've perfected it over the course of the last year plus. There's nobody in the world that can do it better than Russia right now, because nobody has done it to the scope and scale that Russia has done. Can Russia carry out large-scale offensive operations? We'll find out. They're still relatively untested in that area. But they're proving that from a doctrinal standpoint, they know how to do doctrinal defense. They've built the perfect doctrinal defense. The Ukrainians have no chance to crack this. And I have a funny feeling that these units that have been going through training for the last several months, they've been learning how to do doctrinal offense as well. And when the time comes, the Russians will be able to do large-scale combined arms operations of the sort that nobody else in Europe can do. So NATO has no options except to find as graceful a possible exit from this disaster that they've created.
Andrei, let me add something too that I thought was important. I talked about it on a video. They brought in the infamous Patriot system, which is,
Okay.
people, it's got a name, Patriot. It's got to be great. I mean, it's called the
Yeah.
Patriot system, right? And we've been told for years how wonderful this is, how devastating it is. And my understanding is that is the principal air defense system for NATO. That's their cream of the crop. They got it all over the place. And now what NATO has learned is if they were to come face to face with Russia, within the first hour, they'd have no air defense because every one of those, none of them could survive not a salvo of Kinjal missiles, Kinjal missile. So talk about their options and your thoughts on that Patriot destruction, and was that as critical as I thought, as important as I thought?
It is critical in terms of the overall PR and doctrinal impact, because you're absolutely correct. And Scott also talks about it. Can you imagine any American general from Pentagon, okay, being positioned somewhere in the rear, whatever the operational depth, so division commander, or, and having what? Shorat, which is the Stinger stuck on the, and then Patriot, which cannot intercept. Forget about salvo of the subsonic missiles. When you suddenly have your whole staffs, your command and control system, which is in the operational, if not strategic depth, under constant attack. NATO never fought anything like this. I mean, even in Vietnam, you didn't have any kind of, and Vietnam was a serious engagement. It wasn't that your classic multi-domain thing as we understand it today, but it was a serious conflict, obviously. And we're talking about a huge number of not American, but also South Vietnamese, soldiers dead and all that stuff. But here you suddenly have that nobody was bombing American positions so deep into American rear. Nobody. It was, considering it was a tragedy for many there, but it was, you just go out, get some, pot and, screw there, some horse, whatever, so, and here suddenly, it doesn't matter where you are. Even if you're in Brussels, deep in the bunker, it will hit you, and that's what it is. It's decapitation. And the point is, I am on record. And again, it's not like I said something. And fact is, my friend Larry Johnson also wrote about it beautifully, actually, in 2017. We're talking about not years. We're talking about generational lagging behind the serious air defense systems, let alone strike systems. And we don't even know what is coming. Well, I kind of have an idea what's coming next. And when you in the real war, they're basically the rear, where you have the prepositioning of the troops, your ammunition depots, your headquarters, all those things, staffs, spread. It's all becomes a target, and there is a reason why actually Russians put their satellites on their orbits, which are between 5 and 550 kilometers. Because no American missile, theoretically, anti-missile can reach there, and that's the reason, So, and when you have, and suddenly you have the whole ISR turned off, So there you go. What are you going to do? And that's the essence of war. And Russia was preparing for it. Hey, I wrote 3 books about it, So it just that's what it is. This is how you fight the real modern war. And what can I say? So they should really indeed look and learn if they want. I don't know how well they will learn, but for the last 30 years, United States wasn't ready for any kind of serious war after their, using laurels of beating the crap out of Saddam's army, basically. But Russia is not Iraq, So there you go.
Scott, Andrei mentioned satellites. I read recently that the Russians have put up some advanced satellites specifically for Ukraine, that they are, significantly advanced, and that they would give them some new advantages that they don't have. I understand you have made some comments on it. What do we know about about these new satellites, and how does this change the battle?
Well, what we know is nothing. What I've read of what I've assessed is something, but it's in many cases it's speculation. The Russian government hasn't come out and said something like this. If the reports are true, Russia has put up a a radar satellite that has 1 meter resolution, and it gives it a greater frequency of coverage and all weather capabilities, which means that in the past, from what I understand, Russia's imaging capabilities of Ukraine were limited. The satellites that Russia has in orbit weren't designed to collect against the Ukrainian target, and Russia doesn't have the kind of maneuvering satellites that we do. We developed these giant keyhole satellites and things of that nature back when we had the space shuttle, and they were designed to be refueled so that we could maneuver them. And I don't know, I'm not even going to speculate about what our capabilities are today in terms of sustaining that force, but we can sustain that force. That means that as a crisis occurs in the world, the National Reconnaissance Office has the ability to move satellites and get them positioned to get maximum coverage available. The Russians don't. They're sort of stuck with what they have, and what they had wasn't sufficient. And so the United States, and I talked about this early on, when Joint Special Operations got involved in the logistics support, they basically mapped out Russia's ISR capabilities, what their collection capabilities are, and they found the windows of collection and the windows when they don't collect, and they would basically be aware of what Russia saw and then immediately move it so that Russia could target it effectively. Now with this new satellite, that day is done. First of all, the other thing is you can hide under cloud coverage. If you have clouds up there, that classic imaging satellites can't see through the clouds, and so you have a window of vulnerability. And Ukraine has a lot of cloud coverage. But that's done now. Now you have a radar satellite that can see through clouds, operate at night, operate all the time, and it's going to have more passes over the target. It's being put up specifically to cover Ukraine, and you're going to see the Russians having better intelligence, and therefore they'll adjust their targeting to this better intelligence, and it's just going to make the sustainability of Ukrainian military operations that much more difficult, because as things come in, they've been shuttled from one warehouse to the other, moved around. Russia has over time, and we've seen that with their targeting, they've built up a database of these warehouses, and then they, like all intelligence services, you fill in your gaps. And I'm not, again, how Russia decided to fill in those gaps is their business, not mine. I know how some of the things that I'd bring to bear on it. It looked like Russia had done that because they were starting to hit warehouses at the right time, meaning stuff was in there. But even then, that's not as comprehensive as Russia wants. Now with this new satellite, they are going to be able to track this stuff and respond before it can be removed. And I just think that this is going to be another nail in the coffin of Ukraine's inability to sustain this conflict, because even if NATO were to start to surge more equipment in, Russia now has the ability to detect this surge in real time with great accuracy and respond. Surovikin has done a great job in building a strategic air campaign that is responsive to this intelligence. You see it in the air campaign. I mean, what he's done in just taking apart Ukrainian air defenses. This requires real-time intelligence. It requires adaptability. The Russians, when the book is eventually written on this aspect of the campaign, the air campaign, the counter-air defense campaign, Russia will have set a new standard for eviscerating integrated air defense. And remember, it's not just old Soviet era stuff. They're taking apart, advanced U.S. and NATO systems. But this satellite, this new satellite, again, if all these reports are true, is a game changer. It falls into that category of game changer because it fundamentally will cause NATO to reevaluate their entire approach to logistically supplying Ukraine, because now vulnerabilities will be exposed, and Surovikin has a system in place that is by design capable to rapidly responding to these targets with the resources, the assets necessary to destroy them.
Andrei.
No, well, absolutely. Scott actually said a very important thing: mapping. U.S. National Surveillance, Office, and reconnaissance. They know where the Russian satellites are, but we should not also forget that after the January, it was February, there were other two Cosmos series satellites launched, which added to actually Russia already operating Liana. And Liana is a recon and targeting system, which actually gives targeting not only in the ocean. And there are actually 5 passive electronic intelligence satellites and 2 peons. They call peon active radar. But this latest one is, yes, it's a very high resolution. It has synthetic aperture, and it provides extremely good picture. What is else out there? Well, let me put it this way. 3 years ago, I was talking to some people who actually serve at Podolsk. And Podolsk is the place where not only main archive of Russian Defense Ministry is located, there is another the center there, which runs all those things, which fly into space. And once he stated one word, I was like, what the hell? This cannot be right. He said, no, it's still there. And I'm talking about a very old, allegedly old Soviet system Legenda. Remember this 70s, early 80s satellite Cosmos, which fell into in Canada and created the degree of because of the isotope battery. And well, evidently there's something there which is much more modern. So that's what I know. And don't ask me, I heard what I just, I sell it for what I bought it, So there is some things, and yes, they will improve, and eventually this satellite, and don't forget, Russians also launch commercial satellites now. Even those satellites like from the universities. We don't know what the hell they launch there. They do,
Scott, let me ask you this. NATO meeting is coming up in Vilnius. One of the things that I think is of great consequence that has been reported in the last 24 hours, I think it affects all of this. Apparently, so NATO wants to now, apparently, the shores of the Atlantic have washed up in somewhere in Japan, because NATO wants to open an office in Japan. Emmanuel Macron said, Now, whether he sticks with it, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, Macron said, no, we don't want any parts of that. And having paid attention and reported on what happened, the last few months, Macron went to Beijing, Schultz went to Beijing, and all the people that went to Beijing had a huge contingent of business people with them. Mercedes, 50% of their business. BMW just built $100 billion factory in China. So these other countries are saying, this was bad enough, we're looking for a way out. If we follow you into China, this is suicide. We don't want to do this. How long can NATO hold together with the economic pain they're going through and the obvious, they won't come out and say it, but obvious there's a realization that they have been dragged into a very dark alley and beaten senselessly by Vladimir Putin. Actually, Biden dragged them in and Putin throttled them about the face and neck, and now they have to deal with the humiliation. And at some point, they got to face their people that are going to say, you asked us to go through all of this? And you're just going to walk away like, you lost. Now, the people are going to want out, but there will be questions. At any rate, Macron pushing back against the NATO office, meeting coming up. Is NATO on the rocks?
I think NATO's dead. Sometimes, it takes a long time to die, but NATO's dead. It's finished as a viable entity. This expansion is artificial. It's for politics only. To play games. Finland had already begun integrating into a European security framework, joint NATO exercises, and things of that nature. Russia was never going to attack Finland, so this concept of Finland needing Article 5 protection is absurd. All this has done is going to bankrupt Finland, because now Finland has to deal with, for instance, a new 70,000 strong corps that's being formed in the Leningrad district. Finland has to respond to that. There's, I think, another 30,000 troops being put up in the Kola Peninsula. Finland's going to have to respond to that. They don't have the money for this. They don't have the economy for this. It's trouble. There has been a struggle inside Europe for some time now over the recognition that the United States is using NATO as a vehicle for the pursuit of unilateral American national security objectives. And one of those is China, containing China. Macron has been pushing back, on this for some time now. He has said that that France doesn't want, this Europe to become a battleground between the United States and China. Germany has bought into this. Italy has bought into this. Those are the three largest economies in Europe right there, at least for the moment. Who knows what's going to happen to the German economy in the near future. But the fact of the matter is the United States and Europe are having a divergence, or I should say the United States and old Europe are having a divergence in terms of what they deem to be in their best interests. Europe is starting to recognize that America isn't their friend. They're not going to say that right now, but they're looking at the policies that they've been enacting and realizing that these are to the unilateral advantage of America at the expense of them. Schultz, the collapse of the German economy, for what? What has Germany gotten out of this? But the other thing that's happening in Europe is you're seeing a split between old Europe and new Europe. You're seeing this new conglomerate of the Baltic states and Poland together, I think maybe with the Czech Republic, maybe Slovakia, starting to believe the hype that they are something, they are of substance, they matter, they are this, Poland especially, they are now the new center of Europe, etc. Well, they're not. They have no sustainability. They have nothing. They don't have economies. They don't have military forces. All they have is the ability to say yes, sir, no, sir, three bags full, sir, to the United States in hopes that the United States will back them up. So you're seeing Europe starting to fracture. So you have a fracture between Europe and the United States, and then within Europe itself, you're starting to fracture. And the fractures continue. For instance, the direction of the European Union. There's a fundamental disagreement between Paris and Berlin on how to financially sustain the European Union. That's a fracture. Italy has a fracture with France over economic policies. That's an additional fracture. As Turkey develops as an energy hub, you're going to see Southern Europe fracture from Central Europe and Northern Europe about energy policy. So this concept of European unity, it doesn't exist. It exists in the minds of Tony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, and they're European minions. But the reality of it is that Europe is deeply fractured, and as goes Europe, so goes NATO. And I just think that, again, it's all over but the shouting. That NATO has peaked, and it is on the down ramp. And this defeat in Ukraine will be the last straw. That once this Ukrainian defeat has been achieved, Europe is going to have to take a look at where it's heading. And there's a recognition that it can't afford to continue to confront Russia. I mean, first of all, and I'm going on too long. I apologize, Andrei.
It's good.
War is an extension of politics by other means, which means that one of the main aspects of this war is economic in nature. Russia done won this war. I mean, I just came back from Russia, 26 days, and I've never seen Joe Biden, I joke about it, but it's true. Joe Biden talks about build back better, for America, $1 trillion infrastructure. It's happening right now in Russia. Russia is building back better. They are building roads. They are building bridges. They are building buildings. There's construction. All that money that used to flee Russia is being reinvested into Russia. City managers in some of the largest developing cities in Russia have said that, whereas they used to have budget crisis, how do we allocate limited resources? They're calling people up because they have too much money. They need people to come in and do projects because they have money to invest, but they're running out of people willing to and able to do the project. So this is where, investment development people become so important. People with strategies on how to manage the investment development. It doesn't mean that Russia's perfect. It doesn't mean that everything's wonderful. There is corruption in Russia. There is bureaucratic inefficiencies. But what it means is that Russia, the concept of the Russian economy collapsing because of sanctions is fiction. The Russian economy today is actually stronger than it has ever been, especially compared to pre-sanction economy, because they can now operate independent of the West. So the West has no leverages left. Meanwhile, the Western economies are collapsing. Germany's in recession. Britain's in recession. They don't want to admit it. All of Europe's going to be in recession pretty soon. They may be heading towards depression. And that's the end. There's no hope of beating Russia. And once that becomes a reality, the question then has to be asked, how do we do damage control? And damage control in Europe, the most expensive thing in Europe today is NATO. They're going to get rid of NATO. There might be, it might take a decade, but there will be I believe that there's going to be a political impetus within Europe to develop a European security framework. Where did you hear that term before?
Macron?
The Russians. The Russians are the one who put a treaty out there for the European security framework. And I think suddenly this is going to become a term that the Europeans are going to be using, and the people who are ready to sit down with them are the Russians. It'll be the United States that'll be pushed out, and that's, again, because of bad policy.
Andrei, again, two questions. Is it the end for NATO? But here's the other thing that you'll be able to talk about. I want to speak on a bit, and that is, here are my thoughts. Finland, if I'm not mistaken, I'm in a small state, Maryland. I think Finland's got like the population of Maryland, like 6 million people or something. Mm-hmm. Yep. When I look at the Baltic states, they're like a neighborhood, and I mean, these are postage stamp size states. They have been economically strong. Some of them are still getting their electricity from Russia. If Russia just says, we're sick and tired of all you people on our border aggravating us to death, you're cut off. Get what you need from the United States on the other side of the planet, they're toast. And I don't know that Russia will do that. But at any rate, your thoughts. Is NATO dead? And how do these little former Soviet satellite states survive if Russia yanks the cord on them, Andrei?
Yeah, I agree with Scott perfectly, practically in everything he said. NATO is dead, militarily for sure. Politically, it will take some time probably to formalize the end. But do you know what United Arab Emirates is? Emirates.
Right, UAE.
In Russia, apart from the very insulting name for Baltic states, it's called, Scott probably heard it. But they're also called Vimirates, from Russian word Vimirats, which means die out. You can look up their demographics of Latvia, for example. It's actually collapsed. And the same goes with Lithuania, same goes, they are, all three of them probably about the size of one of the districts of Moscow. So, and I don't even know how you can really... how to put it politely, consider them any way seriously, especially, there is a wonderful video about the military parade in Vilnius. It's hilarious, So, and the point is, Russia is not going to switch off the electricity, although some of them, I don't remember who, Latvia probably, already kind of cut off their, with the grid, cut the connection to the Russian grid. But in the end, as any small states, they cannot exist on their own. They need to be, they called limitrovs for a reason, They need to find somebody to get to, stick to. in terms of their culture, I don't know, hunger and, misery, they are very good doctors, in many respects to remove these stupid ideas from people. But in the end, if we look attentively on the larger, so to speak, framework, what can I say? As my friend, the colonel of the Central Apparatus of Ministry of Defense, Vladimir Tukhan, said, we don't even sweat about NATO. So what can I say? Will Russia do the corridor? Russians are not interested in putting on their balance people who are hateful and who do not like Russia. As long as rights of the Russian minority, say in Latvia, are observed, and the free flow, unimpeded flow of communication, transportation communication, is for between Kaliningrad Oblast and Russia proper is preserved, let them be whatever they want. But if they put something serious militarily there, then there will be consequences. Other than that, who needs them? They are called Vimerates for a reason. They have nothing. They have no resources. They have no strategic, except for their being basically their threshold which separates the Kaliningrad Oblast and Russia proper. Other than that, hey, who cares?
One of the things I wanted to ask both of you guys about, another story. We won't go too much longer. We've got a few more minutes. I read an article today about, and it was from Iran, and they said they have a hypersonic missile, which there's a lot to be said about what that really means when you say hypersonic missile. But and it was in press TV, and they said we have acquired the technology. And I just thought to myself, gee, I wonder where from. Now, that's not to belittle the Iranians, because as you, I'm sure, know, they have brilliant scientists. They have a long history. I mean, these are the people that invented, certain types of math. And my understanding, I think they're going to get some Su-35s or something like that. It seems. Do you think you will see, say, Russia and China with the new BRICS and with these new coalitions? Do you think you will see Russia and China arming up? Let me add this, very important to me. The president of Venezuela was in Saudi Arabia. The president of Eritrea, again, Africa, in Moscow. We're seeing the tightening of these new coalitions, and a lot of these are coalitions that have had the hell beat out of them by the U.S. empire for the last 20 years. The sharing of military technology. What are your thoughts on these new coalitions? Start with you, Scott Ritter.
Well, I mean, they're the geopolitical consequence of bad American policy. You can't go out of your way to alienate yourself from the rest of the world and not pay the price. If you think about what the United States has been doing for the last several decades, the effort to control the global economy through coercion, that's the opposite of what free enterprise and free trade is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about competition. If somebody does something better than you, then your job is to work harder and compete with them. We don't compete with anybody. We destroy people. We seek to disrupt your economy. We seek to create rules that are solely to the benefit of us, and the world's tired of it. And we've backed up this economic impotence, because that's what it is, to be honest. If you can't compete and you have to rely upon bullying tactics to economically dominate, then you're economically impotent. And that's the United States. We are literally economically impotent. All we have going for us is a military, and that's no longer a thing. One of the things that we've seen with this the Iranian hypersonic missile, I don't consider it all hype. I mean, that term hypersonic is thrown out there a lot. There are some limitations, but the key thing here is rapid acceleration and precision guidance and maneuverability. And when you put those three things together, you defeat just about any existing air defense system. And you suddenly have a weapon that people have to stand up and pay attention to. People like Israel, who have been carried out a very active, covert, disruptive program against the Iranians, assassinating scientists, blowing up nuclear and missile facilities. I mean, imagine if somebody was doing that to the United States. We wouldn't just be sitting there doing nothing. Well, the Iranians have now built a missile that, when it's deployed in numbers, means that Israel has to be careful, because if a certain red line is crossed, there will be a price to be paid, and Israel will have no defense. Israel will find out what it's like to be Ukrainian, because their cities will go boom, and they've got no way to defend themselves. The United States also has no defense against this system, which means that our bases that are in the area are vulnerable, and our shipping that would be going through is vulnerable. So this is actually a weapon of stability for the region, because what I think it does is it creates an equilibrium in the region. We have to be careful when we talk about military alliances with Venezuela, because at the end of the day, there's a big ocean that separates Venezuela from everybody else. And, the same thing, why America would seek to go to war, a proxy war with Russia in Ukraine or in Georgia, it makes no sense, because the last time I took a ruler and measured the distance between the United States and those nations, it's pretty big, when all Russia has to do is...
Real quick, Scott, the reason I brought in Venezuela, the #1 and 2 oil reserves known in the world. And they were meeting, and particularly when the oil prices, and I feel like Venezuela, and might I add, these are two countries that have both applied to BRICS, and they're talking about a new currency. So you get Russia with their oil. They bring Venezuela. Okay, so you got Russia, Venezuela, Iran, and Saudi Arabia allied. Well, the rest of OPEC has to go whatever direction they tell them. So I think that was about economics.
It already
No,
did.
you're right. Yeah.
All right, Andrei.
OPEC already did. It's already declared 2 days ago, right? If not permanent, long-term cuts. Immediately the price went up, and then we should not forget this very interesting event. Iran, Saudi Arabia, and a number of other Arab states are forming now their naval force to make sure that the flow of oil, from June by Frank Herbert, the spice must flow. So if anybody would told me even 3 years ago that Saudis and Iran will be creating their joint naval force, for crying out loud, pinch me. What kind of universe I'm living in now, And this is unbelievable. And we definitely see the realignment, which I agree with Scott. It was the strategic miscalculation of the historic scale on the part of the United States and, combined West. Again, they thought, they will kill Russian economy. You cannot, and those people who basically pass here in the United States for economists, they don't understand a real economy. They understand how to make money on the Wall Street and those fake indices, like, American, economy is still #1 in the world. No, it's not. China dwarfs the economy of the United States in terms of real economy. It's ridiculous, and it produces 12 times more steel than the United States produces. Actually, Russia produces the same amount of steel as the United States. So, and that is why when people say that now we have, I heard today with Judge and Mr. Alistair Crook speaking, and he dropped this bombshell. I didn't know that. I missed it because I don't speak German, obviously. But he said Die Zeit, Zeit being time, the major newspaper in Germany yesterday published their demographics. Germans are not anymore the majority of their own country. Where do we go from here, guys? So Europe is done pretty much, whatever happens after that. And that is why, for example, Russia relinquished gas rights to Turkey. They said, this is your gas cap. This is our gas. You guys go right ahead. Do it your way. Here's our share, and Turkey said, done. That is why Russia was very interested in. So there's no talk anymore between Russians and Europeans about any kind of the energy cooperation, at least for now, not with those regimes, which inevitably will fall. Anybody understands that. Even the fact that, and again, this is Alistair Crook today, that we have finally the Greens in Germany, they just dropped from the political map. Where were Germans before that when they elected those insane people, be that Annalena Baerbock, be that Scholz, those globalists and insane people, they elected them in the end. You cannot go also constantly blaming United States for everything. There is no doubt that United States obviously has a major part in it, but they were the ones who believed this, pardon my French, BS, this green agenda, which is killing European economy. It absolutely kills it. They don't even understand, because these people, I'm not sure that Annalena Baerbock has even basic college education. She got some certificate, 2-month certificate in some NGO program. These are the type of people who run there. And here I have to go with Colonel McGregor, who said, look at Macron. He's a tailor boy who married his mother. Come on. We have to see people of the stature, people who can make things happen. When you look attentively at France, Germany, United States, UK, for crying out loud, do you see any people of scale? Listen, you may say and hate Churchill or whatever, and a lot of things he deserved to be hated for. But let me tell you, this was the guy of scale, of stature, okay? He sometimes was stupid, but he was the guy who was getting things done, And when you look at that, and of course we talked about de Gaulle, where the Gaulles are. We have Biden, the guy. I'm sure he is still here. Is he somewhere in the space-time continuum? And it's embarrassing. I remember Politburo in Soviet Union. They were fresh young boys compared to what we have now in Congress, and it's unbelievable. They don't understand. They embarrass themselves, on the international arena. And it's just like, you look at this, they cannot do anything. They cannot stop anything. The only thing they know is like a semi-literate, uncultured Victoria Nuland, and the fact that she knows a little bit of Russian doesn't make her specialist in anything. You look at Foggy Bottom, it's just like literally moron upon moron. Tony Blinken, give me a break. Jake Sullivan, political scientist and Juris Doctor, national security advisor. What does he know about national security? You don't have serious military intelligence background. You are not supposed to be in the modern politics today at this stage. You have to be a technocrat, a serious technocrat, or you have to be a military guy who is, as they say, why Scott is not in politics? Why McGregor is not in politics? Why Larry Johnson is not in politics? Well, precisely because competent people, they are not needed. Social order and social demand now is for, those Muppets, Muppet show. And when you look at this, listen what Lavrov stated today when speaking to the 201st military base, used to be 201st Division, in Tajikistan. It's over. Nobody's going to talk to those people.
Last question for the day, and I think it's important. We've got to ask you something about China. So the U.S., they're building, we've got to go to war with China. And I'm thinking, you ain't doing so good in Eastern Europe, and you want to go, 7,000 miles away and just sitting ducks all out in the ocean. Boy, that doesn't sound like a real bright move. Here's my thought. How can they possibly do this? When this is over, I don't see how the U.S., if NATO's saying we're not in, if all of Europe is saying no, not only are we not in, we got a lot of money invested. Our economies are invested. We really don't want this. It will wipe us out once and for all. So the neocons want it. But it seems to me that is a bridge too far. How do they pull this off, pushing for a war with China, once this fiasco falls apart and the rest of the European countries are like, no, we don't want this to happen? I think it comes to a head where you really get a conflict between the U.S. and its vassal colonies. But at any rate, your thoughts, the drive for some kind of a military conflict.
Naval warfare, United States still maintains for all these huge problems, especially surface fleet. They know, even some dumbasses like Victoria Nuland or Blinken can understand, and it's going to be true, because somebody comes to them and says, last chance for us is to leverage what we really have. and against China. And this is excellent American submarine force. It is top notch. It's world class for all problems. There are many problems in the U.S. Navy, but United States has overwhelming technological and thus operational advantage over Chinese with American submarine forces. And this is like the last straw. We have to use it before even this is gone. How far China proceeds, in terms of the improving their submarine force, it's not that easy. United States obviously has the experience and technological expertise behind it. And while American naval weapons are not that impressive, the platforms, Virginia-class submarine is state of the art. It's a beautiful sub. There are only two nations who can produce that type of technology, the Russians and Americans. Britain is not even in the same league. Neither are French, And when you look at this, we have we have 20 Virginias, in the Pacific theater. We can maneuver force, throw whatever else. Let's try, And it's that's the only thing which is it's pathology of American politics, Let's kind of go and leverage whatever we have for now, But it is one of the few true leverages the United States has against China for now. Maybe next decades. Will Chinese now? I don't think so. Russia will provide them the access to the advanced submarine technologies, but something tells me that Comrade Xi Jinping, when his first day being in Moscow, it was the longest session. It was closed behind closed doors. And it had all those big hunches from Russian Ministry of Defense and military industrial complex, and the same for the Chinese. And I think so. I already made it very clearly. I'm going on a limb here. Probably Chinese asked for the Kinzhal and carriers from Russia because they need to keep their surface fleet, or United States Navy surface fleet, away. And they can with that type of technology. If then it's going to be difficult for United States submarines, although they can still do a horrendous damage, but it will be difficult to operate. And then it's kind of completely different game. So that's my thought about it. And you can quote me on that. I can prove it.
Scott Ritter, that, and as I said, and add in the other part, since you have a significant history working with NATO, working with Europe, the U.S. pushing this confrontation with China, but the level of pushback they're going to get for Europe, because Europe knows if the U.S. goes to war with China, it's economic death for Europe. It is economic death. They turn into Haiti. Your thoughts?
Well, it's not just the economic death of Europe, it's the economic death of the United States.
Yes.
And we have to understand that what we're talking about here is that, this war isn't going to start because the United States and China decide they want to square off against each other. It's going to start because of Taiwan, because the United States will have done something with Taiwan that triggers the Chinese concern about independence. And therefore, this problem solves itself in November of 2024, because in November of 2024, there will be an election in Taiwan where the Kuomintang party is positioned to win the national election. And when they do win, all this nonsense goes away. The United States can have the greatest submarines in the world, and they can have idiots like McCarthy, and who say things. They can have senators, and we can talk all we want. But when the newly elected president of Taiwan says, I'm not going to Washington, I'm going to Beijing, and I'm going to have a nice conversation with Xi. By the way, we've been touring China for the last couple of years, so we already have all the connections we need. And we're going to find a way to peacefully resolve this issue. That doesn't mean that Taiwan's going to roll over and give China everything they want. But what it means is that Taiwan recognizes that its future is with China. And this becomes even more apparent as the United States continues to go into retrograde. Remember, Saudi Arabia and Russia just collaborated on major energy cuts that will improve their leverage over the global energy markets. This increase in pricing of energy is going to have a huge detrimental impact on on the United States. As the American economy flounders, as the world starts to incorporate the BRICS currency basket, as the petrodollar becomes less and less as a desirable means of global transaction, as the Eurasian economy, Andrei, I'm not going to dispute you on the submarines, but tell me how a Virginia-class submarine interrupts the New Silk Road.
Yeah, that's the whole point. To put that thing inside the continental Eurasian mass, and you can shoot whatever you want. On the north, of course, you have Russian Northern Fleet, and since yesterday, Russian Pacific Fleet, like in the complement of 60 ships and large number of airplanes, conducts its own, maneuvers and things like that. Yeah, that's how you do it. But in the end, around Taiwan, and again, listen, we saw what happened with the dam, right? We saw what happened to the Nord Stream. So there is literally no kind of limit to the sheer idiocy those people may go. And they will say, yeah, this is the last straw, or this is the last lever we can use. Let's do it. Can they do it? Possible. How probable it is? But I agree with Scott. It's horrendously detrimental for the United States, let alone Europe. But Europe will mean less and less economically in the Eurasian scheme of things. And when you look at this, like, what the hell, man? I mean, and apart from Kuomintang issue, which is absolutely, I totally subscribe to Scott as far as I know China, and this is not much that I know. But Kuomintang obviously is, there is a huge danger. But then we have to look at the also November 2024 in the United States. Let's not forget this little insignificant country called the United States of America. And who we're going to be warning for, I mean, what are we going to have on the menu, Is it going to be Trump? Well, point is, I'm not going to vote for any kind of Democrat, no matter what they do, although obviously RFK is now kind of the flavor of the month, and maybe he means what he says. But the point is, do we have good options again? Do we have Eisenhower's in line? No. Where, I remember always this wonderful, the Beavis and Butthead to America, when the guy goes, in the White House into the picture of like, oh, Ike, where are you when we need you, So this is this is a pivotal historic moment. Who is going to lead us? Who is going to help the United States? Who are we going to elect? Are we continuing with this woke insanity, or with this basically maiming of the new generation of children? So what is in store? We have to look at the larger picture, So, and it's like, I don't have answers for all of that. I simply don't. I never saw anything like this in my life. And I lived through the collapse of the Soviet Union. I almost died 3 times, So while this was happening, and I thought, oh my God. And now what we're observing, I never saw anything like this in my life. It's unfreaking believable in its scale and scope. And you look at this is just, oh my God, I thought I saw things. We ain't seen nothing yet. I think so.
Well, gentlemen, thank you, Andrei Martyanov. I always screw your name up. Actually, today I was talking to I screwed up one of our someone that I work with, and I said her name is Garasina, and all the Russian people started laughing. I said, "What are you laughing at?" They said, "It's Gerasima. It's Gerasima." I said, "Oh, okay, Gerasima." And I said,
"Don't worry about it. I have my name screwed up, screwed so many times. I don't even worry about it."
So go to Smoothie X12, right, on YouTube, and Scott Ritter. You go to scottritterextra.com. Is that correct, Scott?
Yep.
All right. Make sure you check out both of those guys. They are they're all over the place. They're on YouTube. Scott Ritter Extra is a great website. Don't forget to when you go to their sites to subscribe. You can also donate. You can become members. All of that kind of stuff. So they're 2 great sites. I don't miss anything that either one of these guys do, and I certainly want to thank you guys. And we'll get together again maybe in a month or so. And well, I tell you what we should do. after the NATO summit. That's going to be. Well, let me end by saying this. In my opinion, it's going to be crap.
To Russia,
What's that?
hopefully soon.
Uh-huh.
Well, then I have a lot of people I need to meet there, you know, who are from my past life, and there is a lot to talk about there with the whole situation. It will be very interesting. I hope so. It's
great. You know, I expect the NATO meeting to be, you know, well, the Russians are losing, and you know they're down to fighting with shovels, and you know they're using washing machine. That's what NATO meeting. They'll probably have like Baerbock and Stoltenberg, and they'll just, no matter what happens, they'll say we're winning. The Russians are blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So I expect that to be absolutely worthless. So thanks a lot, guys. Certainly appreciate coming on. Hope I didn't misgender anyone.
Well, pleasure, guys, being with you.
All right. Talk to you again soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.